Gravestones can tell us a lot about a person. We can learn their full name, how old they were when they died, who their spouse was, when they were married, and even how many children they had. But the engraving on one gravestone in Northern Virginia is so vague, it's inspired a local legend that's endured for over 2 centuries. Let's talk about the woman buried in this grave, a woman only known as the female stranger. The story of the female stranger is a bit murky. There are all sorts of different versions, and each one has contradictory details. It's not clear which parts are true, which parts have been exaggerated, and which parts were made up entirely. But here's what I've been able to piece together from various sources. Around September of 1816, a young couple arrived in Alexandria, Virginia, traveling from the West Indies. The wife was said to be extremely beautiful, and both of them were described as person of quality by the Virginia Chronicle. The couple rented room number 8 at Gadsby's Tavern, but didn't reveal their identities to many people. The wife was said to wear a long black veil that prevented anyone from getting a good look at her face. And she was gravely ill. In fact, the ship they'd arrived on wasn't even supposed to stop in Alexandria. The husband had requested that they be allowed to disembark early due to his wife's illness. He hired a doctor and, in some versions, a nurse to take care of his wife. Another version says she refused to see a doctor, though that doesn't quite jive with the other details. Even with all this medical care, it was clear the woman wasn't going to make it. Before she died, her husband made the doctor and nurse swear that they would never reveal the identities of him or his wife. He must have made the same request to the tavern owner, who would later scribble out their names in the registry. The woman died on October 14th, 1816. Her body was buried in St. Paul's Cemetery in Alexandria. The inscription on her gravestone reads as follows: "To the memory of a female stranger, whose mortal sufferings terminated on the 14th day of October, 1816, aged 23 years and 8 months. This stone is placed here by her disconsolate husband, in whose arms she sighed out her latest breath, and who under God did his utmost even to soothe the cold dead ear of death." The next paragraph is a quote from Alexander Pope's poem, Elegy to the Memory of an Unfortunate Lady. "How loved, how valued, once avails thee not, to whom related or by whom begot. A heap of dust alone remains of thee. 'Tis all thou art, and all the proud shall be." The last paragraph is a passage from the Bible. "To him gave all the prophets witness, that through his name, whosoever believeth in him shall receive remission of sins." Acts 10th chapter, 43rd verse. In order to pay for the headstone, the husband borrowed about $1,500 from a local man named Lawrence Hill. He later paid him back and then quickly skipped town. The bill he'd used to repay his debt to Lawrence Hill turned out to be forged. A few years later, Lawrence Hill visited Sing Sing Prison in Ossining, New York. The reason for his visit isn't clear, but while he was there, he came across a man known only as Claremont, who turned out to be the unknown man who had paid him back with a forged bill. When Hill confronted the man about this, he said it was probably owing to some informality, and that he would pay him back later. He apparently never did, and what happened to him after this isn't entirely clear. Various versions of the story have him living as a hobo or going back across the Atlantic. In the mid-1800s, a story emerged about a man who visited the female stranger's grave every year in October. He was reportedly spotted several nights in a row, moaning, groaning, and praying. Whether this man was the woman's husband or someone else remains a mystery. In 1898, a man and woman visited the grave, and the woman told the superintendent she knew the female stranger. She said the stranger was the wife of a British officer who had married against her family's wishes. The stranger's husband had gone to France after her death. This woman promised to give more details later, but she never did. Over 200 years after the female stranger's death, Her story continues to baffle those who hear it, and the stranger herself may still be hanging around town. Her ghost has reportedly been spotted in Gatsby's Tavern, in windows from the street, in the ballroom, and in room number 8, the room she died in. She's also been seen by her gravestone in St. Paul's Cemetery. One story tells of a tour guide at the tavern who saw a beautiful woman in 19th century clothing. He followed her into room number 8 where she disappeared, but there was a lit candle in the room. The guide freaked out and went to tell someone about what he'd just seen. When he came back, the candle was no longer lit, but was still warm to the touch. Was this the work of an employee or someone else who wanted to put the candle out and just went undetected, or was it the work of the female stranger herself? So, who were the female stranger and her husband? Was he really even her husband? And why were they so intent on keeping their identities secret? Let's go over some theories. The first theory is a little bit silly, that the woman was really Napoleon Bonaparte in disguise. I saw this theory in several places, but couldn't find any reason as to why people believed it, so I'm going to assume there's not much to it. The next theory is that they were con artists. The husband was clearly guilty of forgery at a minimum. Was his wife working with him? Did they want to keep their identity secret so they wouldn't get caught in whatever crimes they had committed? Were they on the run? Or was only one of them a criminal and wanted to keep the other's identity hidden as well so they couldn't be traced through them? The next theory is that they were royalty or nobility. This is what people in Alexandria thought when they first arrived in town. Some people believed the woman was the daughter of an English lord who had eloped with her commoner husband. Others believed they weren't necessarily of high birth, but had married against their parents' wishes and were trying to get away. This is similar to the story the other mystery woman told when she visited the grave in 1898. The last two theories are kind of wild. The first is that the stranger was really Theodosia Burr Alston, the daughter of former U.S. Vice President Aaron Burr. On December 31st, 1812, Theodosia boarded a ship in South Carolina, headed to visit her father in New York. The ship was lost at sea, and nobody on it was ever seen or heard from again. Or were they? Nowadays, it's thought that the ship likely sunk due to bad weather. But another theory has emerged, that Theodosia was kidnapped by pirates and escaped the desert island they were holding her captive on. Then she somehow found her way to Alexandria and gained a male companion along the way. This theory doesn't explain who the stranger's husband was or why they were so intent on hiding their identities. As the daughter of a well-known political figure, surely Theodosia would want her family and the public to know that she was okay. Also, at the age of 29, she was older than the female stranger, who was 23 when she died. The last theory is probably the craziest of all. It suggests that the stranger was a woman named Blanche Forden. While spending time in India, Blanche became acquainted with two men, John Trust and John Roe. She fell in love with Trust, but Roe had unrequited feelings for her. Using his knowledge of black magic, he put Blanche in a trance and essentially forced her to board a ship with him and marry him while they were at sea. But she got sick on the voyage and, of course, wouldn't be alive for much longer. One source made sure to note that the marriage was unconsummated when she died. Somehow, Trust found out after Blanche died that she was actually his long-lost twin sister, and John Roe, the man who essentially kidnapped her, was also their long-lost brother. Another source implies that they found out about these family relationships before she died and kept their identities hidden to avoid the stigma that comes with incest. Every version of this story I read was incredibly convoluted and contradictory, and this theory is likely not very substantial. So, will we ever find out who the female stranger was? She might have descendants out there who would be interested to know what happened to her. She probably had loved ones who died without ever finding out what happened to their sister or cousin or friend. But it's been over 200 years since her death, and I get the feeling people will be speculating about her for quite some time. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.